The Spotlight, shining a light on podcasts and videos that have caught our attention.
Hi, and welcome to The Spotlight. My name is Jen Spiker, and today I look forward to highlighting a video you'll find in the Vision app. Gary Hoogvliet is 6 foot 6 inches tall, hence the name of his interview program, A Very Tall Man. Gary's interviews can be seen in the Watch tab of the Vision app. He's just finished a new series of interviews on location in the UK. One of the guests on this new series of A Very Tall Man was the founder of the Alpha course, Nicky Gumbel.
The Spotlight with Jen Spiker.
If you were to go back as many years as you can, do you ever remember a school guidance officer saying to you, Nicky, when you leave school, you're going to do all these wonderful things?
No, I certainly don't remember that, Gary.
So how did it begin, life for you?
Well, I was born in London, right, very close to here. My father was a refugee. He'd fled the Nazis. My mother told me when I was 14, she took my sister and I for a walk, and she said, your father is German and Jewish, and you're never to speak to him about it. And I never did. And so I knew nothing about my father until very recently, where I've heard stuff about my father. So that was my mother was from Scotland, and neither of them were churchgoers. But I was brought up around here.
So was that a regret not talking to your dad about it? Because my dad was Dutch and my mother was in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. And
your mum was in a Japanese prisoner of war camp?
And they never spoke.
Did she talk about it?
No.
She never spoke about it?
No.
So you've no idea what happened?
No. And I sort of wonder, do you feel regret, as I do, that I never spoke to my parents?
How long was she in that camp for?
4 years.
Oh, my God. What age was she?
13 to 17 in Indonesia, yeah.
Wow. And she must have been one of the few survivors from it.
Yeah, I think that in this women's camp, they were looked after reasonably well. But they never spoke about it, and I don't know a whole lot about my parents' early life, and I wonder whether that was the same for you.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. No, that is fascinating. So did she never ever speak about it at all?
Well, in as much as that we knew that she was in a
How did you find that out?
I don't know. I have no memory of it.
Okay.
Yeah. And my dad was in Holland, and he was there for the Nazi occupation of Holland in the Second World War. So when I read that about you, I thought, I wonder if you know more about your parents' past than I do about mine, and whether it impacted you at all.
Well, I've discovered about my father's past in the last few years, and I'm discovering things all the time because now books are being written about my family. And research has been done, so I'm finding out more and more about them.
Do you think that if you had known more about what your dad went through, that it might have changed who you became?
I don't know. I mean, I would just love 1 hour with my father when he was free to speak. I would just love 1 hour to know what happened, and because he basically cut off his life from after he got married when he was 52. Sorry, 49. He was 52 when I was born. But he never spoke about anything that happened prior to his marriage. So it was like he divided his life into pre-marriage, no talk, and post-marriage, where he was happy to talk. So I don't... But then a few years ago, I was contacted by a museum in Berlin that were researching my family for an exhibition they were doing in Israel about one of my cousins who was a silversmith. And they said, what do you know about your family? I said, nothing. What do you know? And they sent me a file, including my family tree. And there I saw that my great-grandfather was called Moses, and my great-grandfather was Abraham, not the Abraham, but Abraham. And then I discovered that they owned a bank, a nephew, another Abraham Gumbel. So our family started the Gumbel Bank and was confiscated by the Nazis in 1935. It's now Volksbank. And in 2009, they put up a statue to Abraham Gumbel. And there's now a Gumbel room in the bank. And then I discovered also the various concentration camps in which they died. And that's why, so I realized then one of the reasons my father didn't talk about it, I think he was suffering from post-traumatic stress from what had happened to him and his family. And I think also he wanted to protect me, because I think there's still anti-Semitism around. And he didn't want me to think of it. And I never thought I was Jewish. I never thought of myself, although my mother had said that. I think I'm imagining that was one of the reasons. I don't know.
So did it have an impact on you in the way that you brought up your children? Did you sort of like overcompensate and share everything with them?
It's an interesting question, possibly. I think the impact of something like the Holocaust is continuing right now, because, yes, the way that he brought me up impacts the way I brought up my children. And we now have 10 grandchildren. And I suspect it's with each generation, it's diminished. But still, there's probably an impact on how I brought up my children, which has an impact on how they brought up their children. It's diminished because now I have Pippa, my wife's influence, which was a very, very healthy influence coming in on that. And they have their husbands, their wives, and they're bringing another impact into it. So I think it's diminished, but I think these things last a long time. And it's very recent. Right now, as you know, there's someone on trial for being a guard in a concentration camp. He's 98 years of age, and he's being tried in a juvenile court because he was a juvenile. He was 17 when he committed the crimes. Allegedly committed, I think, 25,000, complicit in 25,000 murders. So this is very recent history. It's not like this. There's people still alive who were the perpetrators, and people still alive who were in concentration camps. And not that many still alive, but there are some.
You have become such a voice and such a personality in the nicest possible way within Christendom then. How did that happen?
Well, I in my first year at university, I was at Cambridge University. I was having a lot of fun. I was really enjoying life. We had a great group of friends. It was a huge privilege to be at Cambridge, but actually I was commuting to London because I was sort of just going to parties in London really most of the time. And then one time, my closest friends still, Nicky and Cilla Lee, came back. They weren't married at that stage, but they were boyfriend, girlfriend. They came back and said that they'd become Christians. And it was such a shock to me because, they were such lovely people, and it was like...
and now they're not.
No, I just was like so worried. What had happened to them? I thought they'd be, some cult had got hold of them, and I thought I've got to help them. And I thought I must do some research. And I didn't really have... It was 11 o'clock at night, and I looked on my bookshelf, and I saw this old Bible I'd had for RE lessons at school. So I started reading it that night, and I read Matthew, Mark, Luke. I got about 3 o'clock in the morning, I fell asleep, I just started reading John's Gospel. And then I just carried on reading the next day. Students had no work to do. I just carried on reading. And it was as if, I guess the way I look back at it now, it's as if the person I was reading about, the person of Jesus, it's like he emerged as a real person. And I had an encounter with him. And I didn't want to become a Christian because I thought it was like everything I associated with religion was so boring. So I really didn't want to be a Christian. But I kind of knew it was true. So I was like, okay, life's going to be miserable. But I got to do it because it's true. And it's like, okay, I give up. Sort of, I'll be miserable for the rest of my life.
So what did all your friends think?
Well, what I actually discovered was the opposite. Jesus said he came that we might have life and have it in all its fullness. So I discovered I was just so excited. I realized it was the opposite to what I feared. what did my friends think? Well, some of them became Christians at that time. And there were a number of us who, in a group, there were 5 Nickies. We used to meet, we had this sort of lunch club of the Nickies. And within a year, all of them had an encounter with Jesus. But not through me. I mean, it was like all through different ways. And so quite a few of my friends became Christians around that time. And the ones that didn't, I think I succeeded in putting off quite a lot of people. Probably for life. They were just like, oh no, not one will become like him. Because I was very overzealous, I think. And because it just seemed to me so obvious. As I'd been an argumentative atheist beforehand, and now I've found it, I thought, they're all going to realize it's true. And, of course, it wasn't quite like that.
On that subject, I walked over London Bridge the other day, and on one side of the bridge there was a guy with a microphone yelling that if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell. And on the other side was a guy with a placard that said the same thing. Overzealous, or in 2023, 2024, 2025, is that still a cool thing?
Well, maybe you can't be overzealous, but you can be insensitive. And you can be a little bit crass about how you go about it. And I was insensitive and crass about how I went about it. So I don't know. I can't comment on them, but I know I was insensitive. I didn't do it very tactfully, and it probably did put off a lot of people. But I was trying to communicate something that had become really important to me, and I realized, I think, that the most loving thing that you could do for anybody was to introduce them to faith in Jesus. And the greatest injustice is to go through life without ever having heard that.
On The Spotlight, we've been listening to part of a conversation between Gary Hoogvliet and Nicky Gumbel. This interview is part of an episode of A Very Tall Man, which you'll find in the Watch tab of the Vision app. To watch this conversation, which is in 2 parts, scroll to the A Very Tall Man UK channel. My name is Jen Spiker. Join me next time on The Spotlight as I share more of this conversation between Gary Hoogvliet and Nicky Gumbel.
For more great podcasts and videos like the one featured today, check out vision.org.au or the free Vision app.